My name is Ingi. I'm the creator of Plang. Plang is a new type of programming language, which I believe is the next evolution in programming languages. The name comes from pseudo language, Plang. Now let's go over a few of the benefits of Plang. You're coding in natural language, so it's easy to understand. Speed of development, which I believe is an easy 10x increase in productivity. This is difficult to measure, and I can only speak from 30 years of programming experience, but you will see this in a demo that is coming up. Identity is solved, which means there are no more passwords and a whole lot more that comes with identity. Pretty fantastic privacy and security. Plang handles these challenges for the developer and the user. Programs will be more stable and have fewer errors simply because we are writing less code. And there are new capabilities that are very difficult or simply impossible to do in operational languages. I'm going to show you how to build the classic to-do app in Plang. You learn the basics. This is so you get familiar with the syntax and the basic concepts. In the videos that will follow after this one, you will see other benefits of the language, such as talking to the LLM at the language level, how to use identity, events, create a window app, and finally, how we should start to rethink how we design our apps. So let's dive into it. So for this tutorial, you must have installed the Plang language and the IDE. Click the link to get instructions or find the video in the detail of this video where I go over how to install it. What we will cover in this video is how to work with database and creating tables, how to start a web server, goal, steps, variables, date and time, handle web request, validation and error handling, insert into database, response to web request, and testing. It's a lot to go through, but it's not going to take long. Let's start by creating a folder for our to-do app. It is simply an empty folder on our hard drive. I put mine on C, app, to-do. You are free to choose any location. Before we start programming, I would like to give context on what our app should be able to handle. There are two things we want to focus on. Number one, create a new task in our app. We will accomplish this by using a REST client to send data to our app. In this case, we want to send data to this URL here, localhost 8080/API/new task using post. We are using post because we are creating data. If you don't understand this interface, do not worry about that for now. Just know that we will be sending a request, which is an important word. So let's remember request. We will send a request with this data, task and due date to this URL, and we want to see the ID that was created. Number two, we want to retrieve list of all tasks in the app. We will do this by sending a request to /API/list using get, because we are getting data. Now let's start programming this app. Next is to create the setup goal. The reason for the .goal ending is because everything in Plang is built up by goals. Inside each goal, we have one or more steps. In this case, our goal is to set up the to-do app. The setup file will contain one step to create the to-dos table. The step will only run single time in the whole lifetime of the application. This is where we see the Plang code for the first time. The first line, setup, is the name of the goal, followed by step to create the table. You define the columns you want in the table, and since Plang understands intent, you simply have to describe in words what you would like to happen. Next, we want to build the code and execute it, so that our table will be created. We run Plang exec setup. If this is your first time building Plang code, you will be asked to register and pre-purchase for a dollar amount to fill up your account. The reason for this is that each build request costs money. In this case, the cost is actually 0, since I've built this code before and Plang tries to limit the number of requests by caching them, saving us a bit. We can see where the build starts, that it finds a module and builds your code using it. After the build is done, it starts the app and runs setup as instructed by us. If you install the IDE, you can see in detail what module is being used for your step, what function it calls, and what parameters are used, giving you full transparency of what's happening. In the file view, you will now see a .build folder and a .db folder. These folders are created on build. The .build folder contains instruction on how to run your code, giving each goal and step their own file. The .db folder contains data SQLite, where your table was created. You can see how each column is stated in the setup file has been created in the SQLite database. You will notice that we never declared an ID for the table. This is because Plang handles the ID creation for you. You will learn later that this is a great benefit. For those that want to manage the ID, you can of course do that. We will now create start.goal. This is the default entry point into your app. This means when you run Plang in your app directory, it will search for start.goal in your folder as the starting point. Let's create that start.goal. In this example, we want to start a web server when we run this app. Since you are writing in natural language, you can say things like on port 1990 or host should be mydomain.com. None of this is strict syntax, it is just important that you state your intent clearly. Now we are going to create a new folder called API. Any goal in the API folder is accessible to a user calling this web server. This is by default and can be changed when you start the web server. Next is to create a goal, new task.goal. This goal will receive data from the user to create a new task in our task app. This is where it all starts to connect. You see how the URL in our client before maps with the API folder and the new task. As you can see, new task is not defined with .goal, as this is optional. You also see that our data, task and due date is going to be handled in the code. Start by validating that the task and the due date is not empty. If it is, an error should be thrown. You can define what the error text is, but we will allow the builder to decide that. Next, we insert task and due date into the database and write the ID that was created in the database into the variable ID, defined by percentage signs. The request object is the incoming data coming from the user. We then write out the ID variable just as we expected in our REST client. Next, we want to create a list.goal file in the API folder. This will give the user a list of all the tasks in the database. In this goal, called list, we have two steps. One is to select everything from the to-dos table and write the results into to-dos variable. The next step is to write out the to-dos variable for the user to see. We now want to build and run the code we have created. We do that by typing in Plang exec into our terminal. Plang Builder will start to build each step in your code. In my case, most of the steps have been built before and are cached. But for the step where I'm checking if task and due date is empty, it has not seen it before and therefore needs to ask the LLM how to make it. For each request that is made to the LLM, you will see the cost of execution, you will see your current balance, and a link where you can add to your balance. Now that the code has been built, the app starts and we can see that the web server is listening on port 8080, which is the default port. Next is to test if this all works. I'm going to show you two ways. Using a REST client you saw before, I'm showing this because most developers are familiar with REST clients. Then I would like to show you how to write a test in Plang. We start by copying the URL from the documentation, the one that ends with /API/new task. Paste in the URL into the REST client. Let's copy the data in the documentation into the REST client and click send. And as expected, we receive the ID that was created. For the list, we simply click the URL in the documentation and we can see the task we just created. To do this in the REST client, we create a new request, paste in the URL, click send, and then we can see our task. Next, I want to show you how you create a test in Plang. Let's create a folder in our project called test. Inside the test folder, we create a new file, testnewtask.goal. We paste in the content from the documentation. There we can see that we want to post a request to the API new task goal, which matches our file in our API folder. Then we can see our data, the task and the due date. You will notice that we have a now variable. This is the current date and time on your system. You can keep it simply as now for the current date and time, or add an operator to indicate you want to add days or subtract days. Then we write the result from the request into the result variable. This is the ID that was just created in the database, and finally write out the result variable. Now I want to build and run the test. To do this, we need to execute plang exec test/test new task. This will build and run the code. Since the current terminal is busy running our web server, we need to create a new terminal, paste in the command and press enter. And as we can see, we have received the ID that was created. Next, we want to retrieve all the tasks that are in the database. We do this by creating test list goal in our test folder. Let's paste in the code from the documentation into the test list goal file. The code shows how we want to get the list from the API/list file, which retrieves all our data from the database, writes them out. We then receive the result into the to-dos variable, and finally write out the to-dos variable. Finally, we run plang exec test/test list to build and run the code. And as you can see, we get the task that we created before. So let's recap on what we covered. We created a database and a table. We started a web server. We learned about goals, steps, variable, date and time, how to handle web requests, validating and error handling. We inserted data into database. We responded to a web request. And we did some testing. We've now covered kind of the basics of Plang, and for the next video we will start to do some interesting stuff. We will learn how to use the LLM in the language and how event works and other things. Now, if the next video doesn't come up, you can go to this bit.ly link and you will find the documentation and the tutorial there. Thanks.